The Night Stalker, the terrifying story of Richard Ramirez. The summer of 1985 was a time of fear in Los Angeles. People double-checked their locks, kept their windows shut, and prayed they wouldn't hear the sound of footsteps creeping toward their bedroom door in the dead of night. The Night Stalker was out there. No one knew where he would strike next. No one knew who would be his next victim. But this story doesn't begin with a killer on the loose. It starts decades earlier, in a quiet home in El Paso, Texas, where a young boy named Richard Ramirez was learning all the wrong lessons about life, death, and violence. A childhood tainted by darkness. Richard was born on February 29, 1960, the youngest of 5 children. His father, a strict and violent man, worked on the railroads, often coming home in fits of rage. The boy quickly learned to stay out of his father's way, spending more and more time outside alone. By the time he was 12, Richard found a new role model, his older cousin, Miguel Mike Ramirez. Mike was a Vietnam War veteran, and to Richard, he was everything a man should be: strong, fearless, and dangerous. When Mike spoke about his time in the war, he didn't talk about medals or heroism. Instead, he bragged about torturing and killing women, showing Richard graphic Polaroid pictures of his victims. One day, Richard witnessed something that would change him forever. During a heated argument, Mike pulled out a gun and shot his wife in the face, right in front of Richard. The blood, the smell, the way she collapsed, it all burned into his memory. Mike was arrested, but the damage was already done. Richard was never the same again. The making of a killer. Teenage Richard drifted deeper into darkness. He dropped out of school, experimented with LSD, and became obsessed with Satanism. At night, he roamed the streets, breaking into houses just to feel the thrill of invading someone's personal space. By his early 20s, he moved to Los Angeles, where he lived in cheap motels, surviving on theft and drugs. But soon, stealing wasn't enough. The excitement faded. He needed something more. On June 28, 1984, he found it. It was a hot summer night. 79-year-old Jenny Vinkow had fallen asleep in her apartment, unaware that someone was watching her. That night, Ramirez climbed through her window and stabbed her repeatedly, slashing her throat so deeply that she was nearly decapitated. It was his first murder. But it would not be his last. For the next year, Ramirez became something far worse than just a burglar. He became a monster. The Night Stalker's reign of terror. No one was safe. Young, old, rich, poor, it didn't matter. Ramirez chose his victims at random, breaking into homes in the middle of the night. He brought a gun, a knife, and a twisted sense of pleasure in causing pain. He would shoot some victims, stab others, and assault many. Before leaving, he often drew pentagrams on the walls or forced his victims to swear loyalty to Satan. The newspapers called him the Night Stalker. The people of Los Angeles lived in fear. Doors that had never been locked before were suddenly reinforced with deadbolts. Gun sales skyrocketed. The city felt haunted. But despite the chaos, Ramirez made mistakes. The manhunt and the mob. Detectives had been tracking him for months, gathering clues from his footprints, bullets, and stolen cars. Then, in August 1985, a fingerprint was found that linked him to the crimes. Within days, his face was on every newspaper in California. Ramirez, unaware of this, casually walked into a convenience store in East Los Angeles. But the moment he saw his own face on the front page, panic set in. He ran. People recognized him. El Matador, someone shouted, the killer. An angry mob chased him through the streets, beating him with pipes and fists. By the time police arrived, Ramirez was bloody and barely conscious. The people of Los Angeles had captured the Night Stalker themselves. The trial of a monster. Ramirez showed no remorse in court. He smirked, laughed, and even held up a pentagram on his palm, saying, "Hail Satan." His crimes were too brutal, too numerous. The jury found him guilty of 13 murders, 5 attempted murders, 11 sexual assaults, and 14 burglaries. The sentence? Death. Ramirez's response? Big deal. Death always went with the territory. But death didn't come from the executioner. The Night Stalker's final days. For 23 years, Richard Ramirez sat on death row in San Quentin prison. Women wrote him love letters. Some even married him. He remained defiant until the end. Then, on June 7th, 2013, Ramirez died, not by execution, but from cancer. The boogeyman of Los Angeles was gone. The legacy of fear. Even today, the name Richard Ramirez sends chills down the spine. His random acts of terror, satanic devotion, and complete lack of empathy made him one of the most feared serial killers in history. His story is a reminder that true evil exists, sometimes hidden in plain sight, and sometimes the monster isn't under your bed, it's waiting outside your window. What do you think? Was Ramirez born evil, or was he created by his past? Let us know in the comments. Subscribe for more true crime stories. The Night Stalker.